Admiral Chen was reviewing the tactical reports when Commander Hayes burst into her private office aboard Prometheus Station. His face was pale with shock and something that might have been terror. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Orcs flagship. War Chief Thok is requesting immediate communication." Chen looked up from her reports, frowning. "Requesting? The Orcs don't request anything. They demand or they attack. That's what makes this so unusual, ma'am. The transmission is marked with diplomatic immunity codes." And Admiral Hayes paused, struggling with what he had to say next. "Our deep sensors are detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the inner system. Something is consuming our kinetic mines, but it's not Orcs bioships." Chen's blood turned cold. The kinetic minefield had been their last desperate gambit. If something was neutralizing it, humanity's defensive options were rapidly approaching zero. "Put the war chief through." Thok's image appeared on her screen, but the Orcs leader looked different than he had during their previous communication. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by something Chen had never seen in an Orc before: fear. "Admiral Chen," Thok began without preamble, "we have a problem that transcends our current conflict. My forces have deployed weapons that are now beyond our control, and they threaten the entire solar system." Chen studied his expression carefully. "Explain." "We created biological entities designed to feed on energy, any energy. They were meant to clear your minefield by consuming the kinetic projectiles. But they've evolved beyond our parameters. They're now feeding on every energy source they encounter, and they're growing exponentially." "And?" Chen prompted, though she was beginning to guess where this was leading. "They've detected the sun, Admiral. Hundreds of them are currently en route to the star itself. If they reach it and begin feeding on solar fusion..." Thok's voice trailed off. Chen felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. "They could destabilize the entire star. Or consume it entirely," Thok confirmed. "Our Biosciences Division estimates we have perhaps 6 hours before the first entities reach the solar corona. Once they begin feeding on fusion reactions, they'll reproduce faster than we can destroy them." The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. If the sun became unstable or, worse, was actually consumed by these biological entities, every world in the solar system would die. Humanity, Orcs, and every other form of life would be extinct within days. "What are you proposing, War Chief?" she asked. "A temporary alliance. My forces will share all technical data on the deep hunger entities. Your solar engineering expertise combined with our biological sciences might be enough to stop them. But we must act immediately." Chen weighed the offer. Trusting the Orcs went against every military instinct she possessed. But if Thok was telling the truth, the alternative was the extinction of both species. "I need verification," she said. "Full sensor data on these entities, their capabilities, and their current trajectories." "Transmitting now," Thok replied immediately. The data package that arrived moments later was staggering in its implications. The deep hunger entities were unlike anything in human scientific experience, creatures that existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions, feeding on the fundamental forces that held reality together. Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring the conversation, looked up from her preliminary analysis with wide eyes. "Admiral, if this data is accurate, these things aren't just dangerous to the sun. They could potentially feed on the strong nuclear force itself. They might be able to consume matter at the subatomic level." "Recommendations?" Chen asked tersely. "We need to stop them before they reach the sun. But conventional weapons won't work, they'll just feed on any energy we throw at them. We need something they can't consume." Chen thought quickly. "The deep platforms?" Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "Too risky. If we destabilize the sun while these entities are approaching it, we could trigger exactly the kind of stellar catastrophe we're trying to prevent." "War Chief," Chen addressed the Orcs leader, "do your entities have any biological vulnerabilities?" "Unknown," Thok admitted. "They've evolved beyond our original design parameters. But they are still biological in nature. Perhaps a quantum virus?" Something that attacks their bioneural networks at the cellular level? Chen looked at Dr. Vasquez, who was already running calculations. It might work, the scientist said slowly. We need to create a quantum-coherent biological weapon that could propagate through their feeding networks. But the delivery system would have to be something they'd want to consume, Chen finished. Something with enough energy density to attract their attention, but laced with the quantum virus. An idea was forming, dangerous and desperate, but possibly their only chance. Dr. Vasquez, could we modify one of our solar collection platforms to serve as bait? Overcharge it with concentrated stellar energy to attract the entities, but embed quantum viral agents in the energy matrix itself? Theoretically possible, Dr. Vasquez replied. But we need Orcs biotechnology to create the viral agents. Their expertise in biological quantum networks is more advanced than ours. Chen looked back at Thok's image. War Chief, are you prepared to fully share your biological technologies with us? No reservations, no hidden capabilities? Admiral, Thok said grimly. If these entities consume the sun, there will be no secrets left to keep. Yes, I authorize full technological cooperation. And so began the strangest alliance in the history of the solar system, humans and Orcs working together to save the star that gave life to both their civilizations. The next few hours would determine whether two proud species could overcome centuries of mistrust to face a threat that neither could defeat alone. All stations, Chen broadcast on wide frequency. Initiate emergency protocol Omega. All human and Orcish forces are to cease hostilities immediately and coordinate defensive operations. The solar war is suspended pending resolution of an extinction-level threat. As her transmission reached across the solar system, Chen could only hope that soldiers on both sides would be able to set aside their hatred long enough to prevent the end of everything they had ever known. The Joint Command Center aboard Prometheus Station was a bizarre sight that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. Human officers worked alongside Orcish biotechnicians, their species' most advanced technologies merging in desperate collaboration. The air recycling system struggled to accommodate Orcish atmospheric requirements, giving the entire space an otherworldly quality. Dr. Vasquez stood before a hybrid display that combined human holographic technology with Orcish bioneural interfaces. The resulting system showed the deep hunger entities in real time, their translucent forms clearly visible as they consumed the remaining kinetic mines and continued their inexorable approach toward the sun. Status report, Admiral Chen called as she entered the command center, followed by War Chief Thok. The unlikely allies had spent the past 2 hours in intensive strategy sessions, sharing technologies that had been classified at the highest levels. The quantum virus is ready for deployment, Dr. Vasquez reported. The Orcish bioengineers have created a self-replicating biological agent that attacks quantum coherence in living tissue. It should propagate through the entity's feeding networks like wildfire. Gorka Bloodspear, Thok's tactical advisor, gestured to the organic portion of the display. The delivery system is also prepared. We've modified Solar Collection Platform 15 to emit energy signatures that should prove irresistible to the deep hunger entities. Chen studied the tactical situation. SCP-15 was one of the larger harvesting stations, capable of processing enormous quantities of solar energy. They had rigged it to overcharge its collectors, creating an energy beacon that would draw the entities like moths to a flame. The risk, Dr. Vasquez continued, is that if the quantum virus doesn't work, we'll have given the entities access to one of our most powerful energy sources. They could use it as a breeding ground to create thousands more of their kind. And if we do nothing, Thok pointed out, they reach the sun in 4 hours and consume the star that powers both our civilizations. His tusks gleamed in the mixed lighting of the command center. Sometimes, Admiral, the greatest risks offer the only path to victory. Chen nodded grimly. Initiate the Prometheus Gambit. All stations, prepare for quantum virus deployment. The plan was elegantly simple in concept, terrifyingly complex in execution. SCP-15 would overcharge its energy collectors, creating a massive beacon of concentrated stellar power. The deep hunger entities, drawn by the incredible energy density, would swarm toward the station. When they began feeding on the energy, they would also consume the quantum virus embedded in the power matrix. If successful, the virus would propagate through their biological networks, disrupting their quantum coherence and causing them to simply cease existing. If unsuccessful, they would have just given the entities access to enough energy to reproduce exponentially. SCP-15 reports ready for overcharge sequence, Commander Hayes announced. Orcs bioviral deployment systems are online, added Gorka. Chin took a deep breath. The fate of two civilizations rested on the next few minutes. Execute. On the main display, SCP-15 suddenly blazed with light as its collectors absorbed and concentrated solar energy far beyond their normal parameters. The station became a miniature star, its brilliance visible from Mars. Almost immediately, the deep hunger entities changed course, drawn by the unprecedented energy density. They're taking the bait, Dr. Vasquez reported. All entities in the inner system are converging on SCP-15. The entities moved through space like living shadows, their forms barely visible except when they passed in front of stars. There were hundreds of them now, each one having grown larger by consuming human kinetic minds. They approached the station with the single-minded hunger that had been bred into their genetic code. First contact with the energy field, Gorka announced. The entities are beginning to feed. On the display, the creatures attached themselves to SCP-15's energy collectors, their translucent forms growing brighter as they absorbed concentrated stellar power. For a moment, Chin feared they had made a catastrophic mistake. The entities were growing larger and more substantial with each passing second. Then the quantum virus began to take effect. It started with a single entity on the station's outer ring. The creature's form suddenly became unstable, its quantum coherence disrupted by the viral agents embedded in the energy it was consuming. Within seconds, it dissolved into constituent particles, its biological matrix unable to maintain quantum stability. It's working, Dr. Vasquez breathed. The virus spread through the entity's feeding networks with terrifying efficiency. As each creature fed on the infected energy, it carried the quantum viral agents to other entities. Within minutes, the entire swarm around SCP-15 was dissolving into quantum foam. But their victory celebration was premature. Admiral, the sensor officer called out in alarm. We're detecting new energy signatures. The entities that were already near the sun, they're not affected by the virus. Chin felt her heart sink. In their focus on the entities approaching SCP-15, they had forgotten about the advanced scouts that were already within the sun's corona. These entities had been feeding on solar radiation for the past hour, growing larger and more sophisticated with each passing minute. How many? She asked grimly. 17 confirmed contacts within the solar corona. And Admiral. The officer paused, his voice filled with dread. They appear to have begun reproducing. We're detecting budding behaviors consistent with exponential biological multiplication. Thok's expression was grim. The entities near the sun have evolved beyond the original template. They may be immune to the quantum virus now. Chin stared at the display showing the sun's corona, where 17 points of darkness were growing larger by the minute. Each entity was now the size of a small moon, feeding directly on the nuclear fusion reactions that powered the star. And they were reproducing. Time until solar instability? She asked Dr. Vasquez. At current consumption rates, 47 minutes until the first measurable effects on solar output. Complete stellar collapse or explosion, perhaps 6 hours. Chin made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. Activate the deep platforms. The command center fell silent. Even the Orcs officers, unfamiliar with the specific details of human technology, could sense the gravity of the moment. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez said carefully, the deep platforms have never been tested under these conditions. Activating them while entities are feeding on the sun could create a cascade reaction that destroys the entire solar system. And not activating them guarantees that the sun dies anyway, Chen replied. At least this way, we have a chance. She turned to face Thok. War Chief, I recommend that all Orcish vessels retreat to minimum safe distance. What I'm about to do will either save the solar system or destroy it completely. Thok met her gaze steadily. My ships will remain, Admiral. We created this threat. We will face the consequences alongside you. Chen nodded with respect. Despite their differences, she was beginning to understand why the Orcs had survived the void between stars. They faced extinction with the same courage they brought to battle. All stations, she announced, implement deep platform activation sequence. Authorization Chen Delta 77 Alpha. May whatever gods watch over us have mercy on our souls. In the hidden depths of the sun's chromosphere, humanity's most secret weapons began to stir. The deep platforms had been humanity's greatest secret for over a century, their existence known only to a handful of individuals across the solar system. Built using technologies that pushed the boundaries of physics itself, they existed in a realm where matter and energy became indistinguishable, the heart of the sun. Admiral Chen watched her command displays with growing tension as the activation sequence progressed. Each deep platform was a miracle of engineering, a crystalline structure no larger than a human hand that could withstand temperatures and pressures that would instantly vaporize planets. They operated by extending quantum tendrils directly into fusion reactions, extracting energy at the moment of nuclear transformation. Deep Platform Alpha is responding, Dr. Vasquez reported, her voice tight with concentration. Quantum tendrils are extending into the fusion core. Energy extraction beginning. The main display showed abstract representations of what was happening within the sun's heart. The deep platforms appeared as points of intense light, their quantum extensions reaching like ghostly fingers into surrounding fusion reactions. But they were not alone. The deep hunger entities were clearly visible as dark spots that seemed to absorb light itself. Platform Beta is online, Dr. Vasquez continued. Gamma and Delta responding normally. But Admiral, the entities are reacting to the platform activation. They're changing course. Chen felt a chill as she watched the display. The entities that had been feeding randomly throughout the solar corona were now moving with clear purpose, converging on the locations of the deep platforms. Somehow, they had detected the quantum signatures of humanity's most advanced technology. They're adapting again, War Chief Thok observed grimly. The entities recognize the platforms as a more concentrated energy source than random fusion reactions. Or they perceive them as a threat, Chen replied. Either way, we now have their attention. The first contact came at Deep Platform Alpha. The entity that approached it was massive, easily the size of Earth's moon, its translucent form rippling with absorbed solar energy. As it touched the platform's quantum field, both human and Orcish sensors registered energy readings that defied comprehension. The entity is trying to consume Platform Alpha, Dr. Vasquez reported. But the platform's quantum isolation fields are holding. It can't quite access the core systems. Yet, Chen added ominously. She could see on the display that the entity was changing, its form becoming more structured as it learned from its interaction with human technology. How long until platform integration is complete? Another 12 minutes for full quantum entanglement with the solar core. But Admiral, if the entities breach the platform defenses before then. Chen didn't need her to finish the thought. If the deep hunger entities gained access to the platform's quantum extraction systems, they would have direct access to the sun's fusion core. They could potentially drain the entire star in minutes. War Chief. She turned to Thok. Do your people have any weapons that could affect these entities at this range? Something that doesn't rely on energy they can absorb? Thok consulted with his biotechnicians before responding. We have quantum disruptors, weapons that attack the space-time fabric itself rather than delivering energy. But they've never been tested against entities of this size, and firing them within a star's corona could cause spatial anomalies, Dr. Vasquez finished. Potentially black holes or dimensional rifts. Chen weighed their options. The quantum disruptors might destroy the entities, but they could also tear holes in space-time that would be just as dangerous as the creatures themselves. The deep platforms might successfully extract enough energy to incinerate the entities, but only if they could complete their integration before being consumed. New contact, the sensor officer announced suddenly. We're detecting an energy surge from Deep Platform Beta. The entity approaching it is changing. On the display, they watched as the entity that had been feeding on Platform Beta's outer quantum fields suddenly began to glow with internal light. Its translucent form became more solid, more defined, and unmistakably more intelligent. It's not just feeding, Chen realized with growing horror. It's integrating with the platform technology, learning from it. As they watched, the entity began to modify itself, incorporating aspects of the platform's quantum extraction systems into its own biological matrix. Within minutes, it had become something new, a hybrid creature that combined the entity's biological adaptability with humanity's most advanced technology. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez said urgently, "the hybrid entity is now extracting energy from the solar core at rates exceeding the platform's designed capacity. It's pulling more power than the star can safely provide." The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. The entity hadn't just learned to use their technology, it had improved upon it. It was now draining the sun faster than the star's fusion reactions could compensate, creating an energy deficit that would destabilize the entire solar system. "Solar output is decreasing," Dr. Vasquez reported. "At current rates, we'll see measurable effects on planetary temperatures within hours." Chen made the hardest decision of her career. "Activate quantum disruptors. Full spread, all entity positions." "Spread, all entity positions." "Admiral," Doc said quietly, "if the disruptors cause spatial anomalies within the sun, then we'll face that threat when it comes," Chen replied. "But if we don't stop these entities now, there won't be a solar system left to worry about." The Orcs quantum disruptors were weapons of last resort, devices that attacked the fundamental structure of space-time itself. As they fired, reality itself seemed to bend around their targets. The Deep Hunger entities, for the first time since their creation, showed signs of actual damage. Their quantum coherence disrupted, several of the smaller entities simply winked out of existence. But the largest entity, the one that had hybridized with Platform Beta, proved more resilient. The quantum disruptor struck it directly, but instead of being destroyed, the creature absorbed the spatial distortion and used it to enhance its own capabilities further. "Impossible," Gorka breathed. "It's feeding on the disruption of space-time itself." The hybrid entity had become something beyond biology or technology, a creature that could consume the very fabric of reality. And it was still growing. Chen stared at the display, watching as humanity's greatest weapon and their enemy's ultimate creation merged into something that transcended both species' understanding. In trying to save the sun, they had created a monster that could potentially devour the universe itself. "All stations," she announced with grim finality, "prepare for Stellar Protocol 7. If we cannot destroy this thing, we're going to have to try containing it. Even if it means sacrificing the sun to save everything else." The final gambit was about to begin. 6 months after the Solar War officially ended, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching the sun rise over a transformed solar system. The star still shone, though its light carried subtle differences that only the most sensitive instruments could detect. The events in its corona had left permanent changes to the fusion processes within. The hybrid entity had been contained, but not destroyed. Working together, human quantum technology and Orcs biosciences had managed to create a temporal stasis field around the creature, freezing it in a moment between heartbeats. It remained within the sun's corona, neither growing nor shrinking, a constant reminder of how close both species had come to extinction. "The joint colonies on Europa are exceeding all expectations," Commander Hayes reported as he joined her at the viewing port. "Human agricultural techniques combined with Orcs bioadaptation are producing crop yields 30% higher than projected." Chen nodded, still adjusting to the new reality they had created. The temporary alliance forged in desperation had evolved into something neither species had expected, a genuine partnership. The Orcs had been granted equal access to solar energy in exchange for sharing their biological technologies. Together, they were expanding into the galaxy beyond their home system, no longer competing for resources but collaborating to find them. "Any word from the deep space exploration missions?" she asked. The New Frontier reached the Alpha Centauri system last week. They've identified 3 potentially habitable worlds, and the Orcs bioadaptation teams believe they can terraform at least 2 of them within a decade. Through the viewport, Chin could see Orcs bioships working alongside human vessels, their organic curves complementing the geometric precision of human engineering. Where once there had been war fleets, now there were construction crews building a future that neither species could have achieved alone. Admiral, Hayes continued, there's something else. Long-range sensors have detected artificial signals from the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy. The pattern analysis suggests multiple technological civilizations. Chin felt a familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. The universe was vast, and they had learned that not all problems could be solved with superior technology or biological adaptation. Some threats required the kind of cooperation that could only be forged in the crucible of shared crisis. Assemble the Joint Command Council, she ordered. If there are other civilizations out there, we should meet them as allies, not as separate species competing for dominance. As she prepared to leave the observation deck, Chen took one last look at the sun. Within its corona, frozen in temporal stasis, the hybrid entity waited, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the power of unity in the face of extinction. The solar war was over, but the age of exploration had just begun. Humanity and Orcs would face the galaxy together, carrying the hard-won wisdom that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from transforming them into allies. In the end, the war for the sun had taught both species the most important lesson of all. In a universe full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination, survival depended not on the strength of your weapons or the sophistication of your technology, but on your willingness to stand together when darkness threatened to consume everything you held dear. The new dawn was rising, and for the first time in centuries, both species faced it with hope rather than fear.